Have you ever wondered what Jesus was doing for all those years before he started his public ministry? The Bible tells us about his miraculous birth and a famous story of him in the temple at age 12. Then, suddenly, he's 30 years old, getting baptized by John and beginning his mission. That leaves a massive gap of about 18 years, often called the silent or hidden years. So, what really happened during that time? Let's dive in and explore the fascinating possibilities. First, let's look at what we know for sure from the Gospels. The Gospel of Luke gives us our biggest clue. After the story of 12-year-old Jesus astounding the teachers in the temple, Luke tells us that Jesus went back to Nazareth with Mary and Joseph and was obedient to them. Then, it says, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. This short verse is packed with meaning. It tells us he had a normal childhood and adolescence, growing physically, intellectually, spiritually, and socially, just like any other person. We also know his father, Joseph, was a carpenter. The Greek word used is tekton, which can mean a craftsman who works with wood, stone, or metal. So, it's almost certain that Jesus learned this trade. In the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus returns to his hometown, the people are astonished and ask, "Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son?" This suggests that for most of his life, his community knew him simply as Jesus, the local craftsman. He would have been a regular part of the Nazareth community, building things, interacting with neighbors, and living a seemingly ordinary life. This ordinary life is actually profoundly important. It shows us that Jesus fully experienced human life. He wasn't just waiting in the wings for his big moment. He was living, working, and learning within a family and a community. He would have attended synagogue on the Sabbath, studied the Hebrew scriptures, celebrated Jewish festivals, and understood the daily struggles of the common people in Roman-occupied Galilee. This deep-seated understanding of human life is what makes his later teachings so powerful and relatable. He wasn't an outsider looking in, he was one of them. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because the Bible's silence has left a lot of room for speculation and some pretty wild theories. Over the centuries, people have tried to fill in the gaps with stories, legends, and texts that are not part of the official biblical canon. These are known as apocryphal texts. One of the most famous is the infancy Gospel of Thomas. Don't confuse this with the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. This text is a collection of stories about Jesus as a young boy, performing all sorts of miracles. In some stories, he brings clay birds to life. In others, he stretches a wooden beam that was cut too short for his father, or even brings a dead friend back to life. However, these stories also depict a young Jesus who is sometimes impetuous and uses his powers to curse those who annoy him. These accounts were not included in the Bible because early church leaders felt they didn't align with the character and nature of Jesus as revealed in the four canonical Gospels. They paint a picture of a child who hasn't yet mastered his divine power, which is a very different image from the perfectly controlled and purposeful Jesus we see in his public ministry. But the theories don't stop there. What about travel? Did Jesus stay in Nazareth for all 18 years? Some legends suggest he traveled far and wide. One popular theory, especially in Britain, is that Jesus traveled there with his great-uncle, Joseph of Arimathea. This legend is the inspiration behind the famous hymn Jerusalem, with its line about those feet in ancient time, walk upon England's mountains green. While it's a beautiful and romantic idea, there's absolutely no historical evidence to support it. It's a piece of folklore that grew over many centuries. Another, more widespread theory, is that Jesus traveled east, to India, or perhaps even Tibet. This idea gained popularity in the 19th century. Proponents suggest that Jesus spent his silent years learning from Hindu gurus or Buddhist monks, and that many of his teachings, like loving your enemy and turning the other cheek, have parallels in Eastern religions. A Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich claimed in 1894 that he had found an ancient manuscript in a Tibetan monastery that detailed the life of Saint Issa, a name for Jesus in the East, and his travels through India and the Himalayas. However, when scholars later went to investigate, The monks at the monastery denied any knowledge of Notovich or the manuscript. Today, the entire story is widely considered a hoax. While there are some surface-level similarities between Christian and Eastern teachings, the core theology is fundamentally different. The Jewish context of Jesus' teachings, rooted in the Old Testament, is far more direct and verifiable. So, if he wasn't performing whimsical miracles, sailing to Britain, or studying with monks in the Himalayas, what's the most likely scenario? The most historically grounded and biblically consistent answer is also the simplest one. He stayed in Nazareth. He lived a quiet, faithful, and observant Jewish life. He worked as a carpenter, supported his family, studied the scriptures, and grew in his unique relationship with God the Father. Think about it this way: his ministry was intense, demanding, and ultimately led to his crucifixion. These hidden years were a period of preparation, not just for his public teaching, but for the immense spiritual and physical burden he was about to carry. It was in the quiet rhythm of daily work, family life, and prayer in a small Galilean town that his character was forged. He was preparing for the cross, one day at a time, in complete obedience to God's plan. The silence of the scriptures about these years might not be an oversight, it might be intentional. The message could be that the ordinary and seen years of our lives are just as important to God as the moments when we are in the spotlight. The daily grind, the quiet faithfulness, the work we do with our hands, the love we show our families, these are the things that shape us. Jesus sanctified ordinary life by living it. He showed that there is profound holiness in the mundane. So, what happened during the hidden years? He lived. He worked. He prayed. He grew. He prepared. And in doing so, he gave dignity and meaning to the hidden years in all of our own lives. The most profound truth might just be the one that has been in front of us all along. Jesus of Nazareth was the carpenter, Mary's son, who grew in wisdom and favor with God and man before stepping onto the world stage to change it forever. Thanks for watching. If you found this exploration interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics like this one. See you next time.